Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Inga Cotton. I'm the founder and executive director of San Antonio Charter Moms, and I'm really excited about the new guest post we have on the blog today. So it's at sachartermoms.com, and I have the authors of the guest post with me today. So let me introduce, let's see, starting on the far side of the screen is Sergio Rodriguez, and he is an occupational therapist, and Rosa Benavides, she's in the middle of the screen. Her background is speech-language pathology, and they are the co-owners of Pediatric Constellations, which is a really exciting service. And I feel like it really solves problems for families. And just like how SA Charter Moms, we try to solve problems for families. I think they're being very innovative about helping families kind of build their village, like their support team. And so that's what the blog post is about. But I'm really excited to get to have a conversation with them so they can explain what they're trying to build. And I think that the SA Charter Moms audience is going to appreciate what they're trying to do, and hopefully y'all can help spread the word about this. So Rosa and Sergio, thank you so much for joining me on Charter Mom Chats and for writing the great guest posts that we have on the blog today.
Thank you for having us. Yes, thank you. We're excited. Like I said, it took us a minute to make multiple drafts of that blog, but we really wanted to tailor it to your audience and make it as meaningful as possible.
Yeah. Well, it's very user friendly, and I mean, I know as like, you know, as regular listeners know, like, so I have two kids. My oldest is on the autism spectrum, and so we had to build, a team. We had to find, like, a great speech language pathologist who could help him improve his social skills, and he needed vision therapy, and that there's lots of ways that you can, if you find out that your child, is developing differently or learns differently, you can get early intervention, you can get support for them so that they can reach their full potential. And I feel like now that my son's a junior in high school, I'm not saying it's smooth sailing, but he's come a really long way. And I think that people on our team really helped make that happen. So, so I get it about what you're trying to do, but I also know that it can be overwhelming to understand, like, how does, what does this type of therapy do? What kind of problem can it solve? And how does that present kind of in everyday life? But before we get into that, I was wondering, can we just each of you talk more about yourselves, like what your own specialty, your own background is? So maybe we could start with Sergio. You could talk about occupational therapy.
Okay, yes. So I've been an occupational therapist for 5 years, and before I became an occupational therapist, I was a behavioral technician for 2 years. I was working at a multidisciplinary clinic here in San Antonio. It's called Stono Therapy. And there, working as a behavioral technician, I got to see what speech did, and physical therapy and occupational therapy. And from all the disciplines, I fell in love in occupational therapy. I was like, I'm going to go to school for that. And after a few years, I graduated as an OT, and I ended up going back to the same clinic where I worked as a behavioral technician because I love it there. And there I got to expand my knowledge and my skills as an occupational therapist. And what we aim in occupational therapy is to help kids be as independent as possible in terms of their daily activities, from the moment that they wake up all the way to the moment they go back to sleep. We're talking about dressing, social skills, self-feeding skills, meal prep, executive functioning. It's just the pre-planning component that we don't realize, but every decision that we make gets pre-planned. So we help parents and kids understand their unique brain and try to come up with the most efficient and individual interventions for them. So that's basically what I do as an occupational therapist.
Unmute. Okay, so, Rosa, can you explain, kind of like how Sergio did, but explain for your specialty, which is speech language pathology?
Yes. So I had a similar journey as well. I was also a registered behavior technician for a few years before I actually went to grad school to become a speech language pathologist. I think for me, I fell in love with early intervention. So I love how little ones start interacting with language and their social skills, their joint attention. And then being bilingual too, I really like to explore how bilingualism is entailed and how it interacts with communication. But as an SLP, we also work on speech intelligibility. We do feeding, So picky eaters, swallowing, as well as, like you mentioned earlier too, social communication. And yes, I feel I've been doing this for 3 years. I've been working with the pediatric population and still learning every day from our little
Yes.
ones.
Really.
That's true. Yeah, it's yeah, like raising being around kids. It's like there's always surprises, right? But
Oh,
yeah, but it, but it keeps life interesting. So
oh, 100%.
yeah. Well, thank you. So each of you explaining about your own specialties is helpful, and also talking about working in like a multidisciplinary context. But so I think one of the things that's so interesting about Pediatric Constellation is that y'all partner with specialists in so many different areas. So I was wondering, can y'all describe like what are some of the other types of therapies besides occupational therapy or the speech language pathology that y'all interact with like through Pediatric Constellations?
Yes. So through Pediatric Constellations, we see there's multiple, of course, like disciplines, but from our point of view, we see kind of like the initial interaction with healthcare providers, which will be a diagnosis. Most parents are like, is my kid has a diagnosis of anxiety or autism or ADHD? So we decided to partner around with healthcare professionals that can facilitate and give diagnosis or offer testing for the main questions that parents have. So that's again, like that's the first point of contact. And then from there, we also see the therapy side. So because we have on the category under treatment, we have multiple disciplines. We don't, I mean, every human is a complex person, that it's not like one discipline is going to have all the answers for that specific kid or that specific family. So we have to partner with other disciplines. We cannot do any of this all by ourselves. So we partner with psychologists, we partner with physical therapists, we partner with other speech therapists, other behavioral therapy clinics, ABA clinics, and other occupational therapists. Like the need is it's so big that again it at this point it's not just about us, it's like what's best for the community. And that's where when we realized when we started our transition into private practice, it's like no, this is way bigger. Like we should try to solve this problem, and here we are trying to solve a problem.
Yeah, well, I think when we were talking about this offline, like one of the things you talked about is that so okay, so even once the diagnosis happens, right? So like the family, like maybe their first point of contact is a healthcare professional, and then that's how they get a diagnosis. And they realize they need to find a specialist, they need to find this therapy, but then it gets so complex with well, what insurance do they take, and what time of day can the appointment happen, and then geographically, and right, and so then it can become almost impossible. Like the parent feels like they're just threading a needle, trying to get their child access. And that's I know from like this comes up in our this is my chance to plug our Facebook group, right? So any viewers, if you're not already, please join our discussion group on Facebook. And this is a type of topic that comes up a lot, that of a family, like they want to do the best for their kids, and they feel like they're not able to access the services that their children really need. And like as Rosa mentioned, early intervention is really important. So
Yeah.
timeliness really matters for having the best outcome.
And parents are so busy. I mean, they're most of the time they don't have only one kid, they have other kids and they have other family matters, which we completely understand. And again, like in our head, once we started transitioning into private practice, it was already just hard, and it was just us and trying to coordinate with families. Again, it's like we'll get a referral from a clinic, and then we'll contact the family, and it's like, oh well, we don't have that we don't have the ability at that time. I was like, okay, so it was just like a lot of friction. And of course, when there's friction, then there's less likelihood of a follow through, unfortunately. And I feel again like we should, with so many technological advances where you can order something right now and then get it delivered in 3 hours, like I feel like healthcare is definitely not moving as fast. And when it's needed, and when we see it in other industries. So we started looking around, and I was like, hey Rosie, like what do you think about this? Like do you think this is something that we should try? And took us a couple of days of discussion and back and forth and brainstorming, but we were like, no, I think it should be, again, if it can help us, it can help other clinics, and we help other clinics and families. Like, I mean, again, the whole community can benefit from this. And again, it's just trying to make it add less friction into finding services, because like you said, like you can go to Google, yes, but it's like, oh, I don't know what insurance they have, and I really don't know like their availability. And then you call, and we call some clinics, and they don't answer quickly, unfortunately, because they're busy as well. So again, trying to make it as efficient as possible, and that's one of the features that that's on the Pediatric Constellation, that you can see upfront what's their availability from that clinic. And again, it won't be perfect, but we really feel like it's a better solution than what we have previously.
Yeah, and well, one of the things I feel like you lay out, you communicate really well in the blog post, is that it's sort of like, well, what have families been relying on, right? Like they might just rely on referrals from their, their family physician, or they might be like asking friends and family, but there's sort of pros and cons like to each of those approaches, right? And so I guess maybe what are some of those pros and cons, and like how does the Pediatric Constellations like system kind of address that?
Yes. So do you want to?
Well, I just also wanted to mention too how there has been like one of the things that also inspired us for Pediatric Constellations, or to like make it happen, was how many people or many families will call, how were mentioning, and unfortunately a lot of these places also have wait lists, and we also wanted to make sure that all those private practices that have been created recently, and like OTs, PT, speech, ABA, all those newer clinics can also come through the website, or through the platform, and that way families can also find those clinicians out, not just the ones that have been recommended by pediatricians, even though they're great referrals. However, if that particular clinic has a wait list, we also want to encourage families to know that there might be a way for them to find services regardless. But then going back to your question, you can add that.
And I'll mention one more thing, because she reminded me of a conversation that I had with a physician. I was telling her about our approach and our solution, and she straight told me like, hey, but I like to send my families to a multidisciplinary clinic. And I was like, that's awesome. I would love that too. But unfortunately, there's only like a handful of clinics like that. So because there's a limited number of multidisciplinary clinics, then they have the waiting list. And I told her our solution is not to send them there. Please send them there. They can be on the waiting list, but we would like for them to see what other options they have in the meantime. And let's say it's I don't know, let's say, for example, like a 6 months. I think 6 months is relatively what we hear across the board. It's like they can work with someone else in the meantime, so they're not wasting 6 months of like no services, no progress, no solutions at all. And once they get into that multidisciplinary approach, that clinic, they then can transition out. There's no therapists that are going to be like, oh no, please don't go. Like, they will understand, because the multidisciplinary clinic is the ultimate clinic. And then after what I said, she was like, oh, she was super open about it and honest about it, and she didn't see that perspective. And after that conversation, like I think she got to see our point of view. And again, that's just why we want to have conversations like this with the community, so they can see our approach, and hopefully they can see the benefit out of that. And then with that in mind, going to your question, Inga, I mean, of course, every decision, every option has pros and cons, and there's no perfect solution. And I feel like even us in healthcare in general, like, yes, we might have a more specialized knowledge about that specific field, but it can go wrong if we don't take the time to get to know your family, your goals. Because I can give you a textbook solution for whatever category we can mention under occupational therapy. We can talk about handwriting, but if I don't get to know your family, your kid, what they like, it's not gonna be as valuable because again, I'm just giving you just a flat answer, and I think that's one of the cons that we sometimes see very often in healthcare because we're always in a rush. We don't take time to really get to know what's important to you, and without the full context or the full image of your family, then our solutions are gonna come short because of us, not because of the family or anything like that. We were rushing time.
Mhm.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, our family, we've been with the same family doctor for 14 years, but I know that's unusual. But I really see the benefits of it because she's gotten to know our family
Yes.
really well, and it was a real turning point in being able to take care of my son. Just having her as a consistent, But then, I would say I used my network a lot and we did have to hop around, like there was one experience with a speech therapist who just wasn't a good fit for my
Yeah,
son.
it did
We
happen.
had to change, and yeah, and I feel like I am an unusually diligent researcher, which is why I created SHR Moms, because it's like I love doing this and I want to help people. But like you said, people are really busy, and
Yeah.
not everybody should have to put that much energy into it. Like there should be a simpler solution, and there's so much technology out there. Like why aren't we using it to a better purpose? And but that's why it takes an inventor. It takes tinkerers like you guys too, who want to
Oh,
make
thank
stuff.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inga. And to go back to your comment about your family support too, like they will know your family way better than the first visit you have with a healthcare professional. And that's valuable because it's quicker. You don't have to wait like, I don't know, a month, 2 months to see like what you do with a physician typically. And with a support that they know that your family, you're gonna get more quicker solutions, hopefully. But of course, like it gets tricky because they giving you solutions based on like their experience, and their experience is going to be a little bit different from yours. And that's again, that's why we have to have both ends, a little bit of the specialized knowledge, but also mixed with the time that another a friend or family will know your kid and your what's it called the whole picture of your family.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, and plus, like, research keeps happening, and practices change, right? So, I mean, my
Yeah.
son is 16 now, and like ABA has a much different role now
Yeah.
than it did when he was like in kindergarten. Like, I mean, it was, I don't know. It just seems like ABA is a lot more widespread, and just there's I don't know, different approaches. And I remember back then too, there were like, it was very difficult to access a developmental pediatrician. That there were very few offering that in the region. People would sometimes travel to other cities to try to see a developmental pediatrician. So what you're talking about wait lists, it's like, oh yeah, I get it, and
Yeah.
it still comes up in like so
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
in some of the moms groups for autism families, and I know from listening to these younger families, like it's still a struggle, like facing wait lists.
Yeah, and even with that, like we had an experience with a family that was looking for an autism diagnosis, and the longest wait list, and this was probably like 2 or 3 weeks ago
Mhm.
that I talked to this family, and the longest waiting list, at least for in San Antonio, was 6 months at a clinic, but the shortest one was 8 months. But it was like, hey, just FYI, like this is all your options, but this is the shortest one, and it's a little bit like on the other side of town. But again, like again, we will never tell parents like go specifically to this location. We like again give them options
Options.
so they can make the best judgment for their family. And again, all of the options had the insurance that they were looking for. But yes, again, it all comes to options and try to facilitate as much as possible this journey for the families.
Hmm. So okay, so how would it work like for a family, right? So it's like they would initially go to the website, and then they can fill out the form, and then that's what will help them kind of assemble this team that they need,
Yes,
right? Okay.
yes. So it takes. I tested it multiple times. It should not test. It should not take more than 2 minutes. You can do it from the phone or your computer. You can go directly to our website. There's a link. Find my therapist. Find my professional, and it will take no more than 2 minutes. Once you're done submitting that application, it will ask you to create your own password. It will request already your email, so you create your own password, and immediately will give you access to a list of suggestions of who is available based on the information that you were based on the services that you were looking for. And even let's say maybe you don't have the availability, it will still give you that professional. That way, it's like, because I mean, if you might be looking for, let's say, a 3 o'clock opening only, but some parents just do one hour, let's say, for example, but in reality that professional has at 4 o'clock available. It will still show you that, so that way you're like, oh, you know what, I can still make 4 o'clock work. It's not sometimes it's a hard no, like this is the only time because of work or whatnot. But again, we don't like to assume that. We will still give you the the software will give you the suggestion. That way you can see if you can move things around.
Yes, it'll give you like a percentage, which
Oh, sure.
sounds interesting,
Yeah.
but like how compatible are you? But it gives you a percentage based on all the information that you provide us, such as how far you might be from that clinician, the insurance they take, or even if you're a little more flexible and you might put like, I might have a certain amount of money that I would be willing to pay out of pocket. It'll give you a clinician that is maybe only private pay. And then like Sergio mentioned, the scheduling, the flexibility of the scheduling, or if you're looking for services at home instead of at a clinic, it gives you all of that information because that's the information you're providing us. So it'll give you a percentage, and then that way you can pick and select two if that clinician maybe specializes in a specific area that you were looking for. It'll also give you that information so you can have available or accessibility to that profile from that specific clinician, and you can just browse pretty much.
There was another mom. She wanted home services, and we messaged her like, hey, there's no providers that provide home services with your insurance unless you're thinking about private pay. But I told her like, there's a clinic like within like 5 miles with you that I know you're looking for in-home services, but this clinic does take your insurance and it's available like today you call. And she ended up going with that clinic. So I thought that was pretty neat. Again, it's not such a, if I would assume like, oh, she said home services, I'm not going to say anything else, then we might have missed that opportunity for her family to get services sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Wow. I'm thinking, I was trying to plan a trip for my family over the summer and like looking at different flights, and like it's so complicated. There's so many different, and we finally narrowed it down to like, okay, this is the best flight that has the shortest layover, this, that. But like, I mean, like the complexity of trying to find all this stuff. And like, I mean, I remember like, and you know, I'm lucky. I have, you know, I'm kind of self-employed, or, you know, like SA Term Moms was just a volunteer project back when my son was really little. Cause I knew I needed to prioritize him, and I didn't want to have commitments to grants and foundations and not be able to beat my metrics and stuff. Okay. So I got to take care of my son first. You know, and, so yeah, just, and I think people who don't live it don't realize like how challenging it is. And that, I mean, I've seen studies about like the well-being of, you know, parents who are caring for, you know, children with, you know, unique characteristics. And it is one of the toughest life experiences that you can have, is, you know, being a parent caring for a child who needs this extra support. And I feel like I barely qualify for that. I mean, my son has made so much progress, and he can do so much now, you know, and like, but still like the terror of being like a parent being, I love my kid and I want the best for them, and I don't know what to do. And I you know, I'm hearing conflicting things from different sources, and you know, I'm getting blamed for not doing this or that for my kid, and like being judged. And I mean, that's some of the most difficult times in my life, where, you know, decision making about caring for my son. And that's what I'm super grateful about how much progress he's made. And I know there are families who are dealing with much more severe struggles than what I dealt with. So anyway, that's sort of my commentary about, for people who are like, well, what's the big deal? Like, why is this important? No, this is a really big deal.
It is a big deal. And I do want to highlight something about your comment, Inga, and I really appreciate you also talking about the end goal, because at least what I see from social media, I feel like we are constantly talking, or at least what I see on social media is like constantly talking about how hard it is and the journey that they have, which it is. But we want to also, at least with our social media approach, we want to let parents know about the end goal. Like, this is what could happen. Like, it is hard. It's not going to make it easier, but I think it's very important to highlight what's the end goal, because without the end goal, it's going to be even harder. And for a lot of families, and I do want to highlight the fact that you mentioned that as well. Like, it's not just all positive, but at the same time, it's not all negative. Like, it's a mix of ups and downs. And I mean, we don't have kids of our own, but we interact with so many moms, so many dads, and so many kids that I mean, we can we hear how hard it is, and that's why we try to
Make it easier for
make it
them.
easier. Yes.
And help as much as we can, not just from our standpoint as me as an SLP or just an OT, but also with Pediatric Constellations, trying to make it a smooth transition or a smooth sale for parents to find the services that they need and they want.
And once, and it's multiple occasions, like once throughout my sessions, I try to explain as much as I can to the families, because I feel like once they understand why their kid is having a hard time with a specific activity, they're like, oh, well, that makes sense. And that moment right there, it's such a huge difference, because without comprehension, I feel like there's less frustration for the parents, because now they get to understand really why their kid is having a hard time with handwriting or communicating or anything. But again, it's our job to try to explain that to the parents so they can understand why things are a little bit tricky. And it doesn't mean they cannot learn. They just need a different approach, because they're so unique that they just need a different approach.
Right. And it's not that the kid is trying to be difficult or that there's something wrong with them. It's like, no, like it's with help from the team, with find your village, and then they can help solve problems, and then just the relief of
no one likes to do hard things, and of course much less our kids. So if we make it really hard for them, they're going to show you that they really don't want to do it. But if you make it unique and fun and motivating, and you adapt things just to the perfect level where it's tricky but not too tricky for them, then it's a huge difference. And that's the cool part from, I mean, we're biased, but that's the cool part about therapy.
Yeah. Well, one of the things about your post that I really appreciate, that I think will make it like useful in the long run for families, is that like you help to get rid of some of the mystery about like, well, what are some of the issues that a family would see in real life, or that they might ask their healthcare professional about, and then to get steered towards like, oh, well, that's something that an occupational therapist might be able to help with, or this is something psychology could help with. Or so I have a little checklist here. So if you could each kind of like briefly, so maybe Sergio, you could talk about like, so what are some issues that occupational therapy could help with? And you've mentioned like handwriting, you've mentioned like feeding, like any, like even like getting dressed, right? Like zippers, buttons, things like that. So
yes, let me start with school, because charter moms, like, because I feel like most of the times from the families that I work with, moms didn't really understand like why their kid were bringing their books so close to their eyes, or why they were tilting their books, or why they didn't want to do any writing, or anytime they asked their kids to do anything in relating to homework, they had like a huge meltdown. And it was like, oh, can I see anything on the handwriting? And it's like, well, it's tricky. I mean, we can see like their handwriting, they're having a hard time with handwriting. And again, no one likes to do hard stuff, so much less our kids. So we have to work on things that are tricky in a fun way. So we can work on handwriting, we can work a little bit on their vision. So vision it does fall under occupational therapy. Sometimes we do have to refer out to actual visual therapy when it's too complex, because they have like way more better equipment to measure like eye gaze and how rapid your moves are moving, or your eyes are moving, or are they going in a systematic way versus like being kind of more like jerky, and all that affects, of course, the handwriting and reading. Same thing with cognition or pre-planning or anything under executive functioning. And if your kid is having a hard time like recalling, oh, I need to finish my homework, or I need to put all of those things into my backpack, that will fall under occupational therapy as well. What about, you want to go with speech therapy?
Sure. I'll go for speech therapy.
I'm talking a lot.
So with speech, you would look at the receptive skills, so what your child understands, your expressive language skills, what your child might be expressing, their vocabulary. In terms of more like school-based, we do work on reading, although we also do refer out to reading specialists if the school has reading specialists. We also do their grammar, their like syntax, semantics. We practice, like I mentioned before, feeding, but that would be, more at home, or picky eaters as well. You didn't mention you also do feeding.
I was thinking
Yeah. And so, feeding, syntax, your voice as well. So if maybe a child has a raspy voice, or their volume might be too high or too low. Also fluency, so stuttering. We also work with that. And as I mentioned too, like early intervention for me is a big one. Just trying to figure out, like, if your child maybe does not have the vocabulary, figuring out maybe other ways to help out, not just with your voice, but also could be sign language, or alternative methods of communication, so your gestures, or AAC devices, speech generating devices. We also work with that, and it's always in collaboration with other professionals. So like OT sometimes helps with that. Like Sergio mentioned, vision is really helpful, like some helpful knowledge to have when you're figuring out AAC devices, as well as if the child is able to isolate their finger to click on those symbols, or if they need a different approach as well. So we do have a lot, I
we do
feel.
overlap. Well, the other thing that we overlap is the feeding component, which is again, it's kind of like, well, I want to work on feeding. Should I go with an occupational therapist, or should I go with a speech therapist? And just generally speaking, I would say that in terms of like feeding, if it, and this is kind of like what we explain to parents in terms of like before the kid brings their food into the mouth and they start chewing, all that beforehand, you can consult or work with an occupational therapist. We're talking about using utensils. We're talking about meal prepping, like actual, depending on the age, of course, are they able to prepare themselves a meal and recall all these steps that is required and clean up after themselves and be safe around the kitchen and using safety knives and all of that. And
Sitting in your core
sitting, yes,
muscles, your sensory
yes,
aversions, maybe some kids have sensory aversions to specific textures,
yeah.
and
And
that
it,
would be more
and
okay.
more than likely, it's not just in their mouth. We're talking about the whole body, and of course, like if they're not even confident to touch it or smell or anything like that, they're not. No one will bring anything to their mouth if they don't feel comfortable just to touch it or even see it. So we definitely work on that in occupational therapy. And then after that, after all the kids have their food in the mouth, it's better to consult with a speech therapist.
And so once it's, like in the mouth, we look at all the articulators, so their tongue, their teeth, soft palate, how they're swallowing. And that also brings in, I did mention speech. So intelligibility, maybe your child might not be as intelligible to others as he or she is to you. So we make sure that as speech therapists, we are making sure that the child is intelligible to everyone. So that way we reduce any frustrations or miscommunications with others.
You know,
Yeah. Well, that's okay. That's really helpful because we've talked about occupational therapy and speech therapy, and then but like through Pediatric Constellations, you guys also help families locate physical therapists. So can
yes.
y'all talk more about that?
Yes, physical therapist. At least from our experience, like we contacted a lot. There's a physical therapist that specializes on vestibular therapy. So a lot of kids, especially our kids with autism, they have a hard time with the vestibular input. That it's basically we all in our ears we have like different canals that tells you like if you're upside down, or you're going fast, or you're going slow. And a lot of our kids have a hard time regulating their vestibular input. That's why they have a hard time with balance or moving, or they're constantly like bumping the wall. So she will be a good referral in terms of like working on specifically on vestibular input. But we also have other physical therapists that specialize in sports. And again, like sports are a big thing for some families, and they would like for the kid to have the ability. So it's not, and from what I talk to parents, like it's not that they want to force their kid to do a specific sport. It's just they want to make sure that they have the skill to try it, and they can decide on their own if they like the sport or not. Because again, if they don't have the skill of them, they don't know how to teach their own kid that specific sport. Well, the kid is not going to be as interested as if they have the skills required for participating in that sport. So yeah, the physical therapy is definitely another discipline that they usually find on the pediatric
So they
constellation.
would mostly work on what strength, balance, movement,
Core,
coordination,
yes.
your core, and then like you mentioned too, vestibular
Mhm.
and orthopedics.
Ortho, yes. Toe walkers, a lot. If toe walking is especially around the age of 3, it can happen. It just shouldn't be like, oh, my kid is toe walker, like immediately go with a physical therapist. But if it continues for a long, long time and we don't see any changes, or it's always toe walking, they're not alternating between the toe walking or like having their feet flat on the ground, then it will be recommended just to talk to a pediatric physical therapist to see whether or not is there anything else that we need to work on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and when you were talking about sports and stuff, like it's not so much like trying to like push kids into something they're not interested in. It's more about giving them like a life full of choices. Like I feel like that's what how I've tried to look at it for my son. Is like I don't know what he's going to be interested in, but I want to at least open doors for him. And then whatever he gets excited about, that's what he's going to do more of, right? So it's like we avoid things that are frustrating and we do more of the things we enjoy. We want kids to like do lots of the things they enjoy, get really good at it, and maybe that will lead them to whatever their career or their purpose in life will be.
They get so proud. I like it's cool whenever you get to see like a kid find a game or activity that they were not able to participate in before, and once they start to do it, it's like, oh, this is fun. But you can see it on their face, and it's a game changer.
And it just helps them to be active, run around, like learn something new, being involved in extracurriculars, being social as well. So extracurriculars they're very important too for a lot of families and for the kids.
Yeah, they are. Okay, so I want to touch on some of the other types of
Yes.
service providers that families can connect with through Pediatric Constellations. So another one is applied behavior analysis. So maybe can you talk more about like sort of under what circumstances might a family look for that as a solution?
Usually for ABA, it's a board certified behavior analyst, or they're also called BCBAs, or RBTs, which are under the BCBA supervision. And what we have seen so far, at least here in San Antonio, is that for you to receive services from ABA, you need an autism diagnosis, especially if you want to use your insurance. But ABA does work on behaviors. So they do behavior modification with reinforcement in order to decrease maladaptive behaviors, as they call them, right? So it would be behaviors that may be non-compliance, tantrums, self-injury, physical aggression, but they also do communication as well, since they are working on those behaviors. So maybe the child does not have the words to express that they're feeling a certain way. So therefore they will work on that communication as well, and their social skills, their joint attention. Do you want to add anything else about ABA?
Yes. Also, the ABA clinics that we've been working with, they are also before when I started being an occupational therapist, they were not so open about like sensory processing disorders and how that can become like aversive, and kids don't know how to self-regulate their emotions, and it's like from 0 to 100, and it's like a big flow of emotions. And the PCBAs and ABA clinics that we're working with, they are more willing to like collaborate with other specialties. Like there has to be a reason why kids are getting like this upset, and for ABA, I feel like they work again like with like the most drastic behavior sometimes, and again, it's one of the things that I don't see very often in social media because it's so hard to talk about it. But there are kids that are really aggressive. There's a reason. It's not them. I'm not saying it's them, and that's our job to, as therapists, between OT or speech and ABA, figure out why is making them upset. And at least with the ABA clinics that we're working with, is like, hey guys, like, hey, collaborate. Like, what can we do? What other interventions or modifications do we need to use? More visuals or another alternative in terms of like using an AAC device to facilitate the communication and decrease this aggressive behavior. So that will be one of the reasons we will recommend ABA services, not only for those drastic behaviors, but they do work a lot in cognition as well, and memory, and receptive skills in terms of following the multiple steps sequences as well. And they kind of go hand in hand sometimes with participating on daily activities as well, to make sure that if the kid are able to do the activity physically, it's like, okay, can they do it now on their own? Can they follow all the steps on their own? Do we need, again, another visual, and adapt the environment specifically for what that kid needs?
And always looking at that function of the behavior. I know a lot of BCBAs and RBTs look into that, as well as trying to make their therapy sessions fun. We do have a particular clinic that it comes to mind that they do everything play-based. So as long as it's fun, your child will learn.
Yes.
That's a given.
Yeah, I know. For me, trying to understand, like, it's like I'm thinking about like before ABA was a therapy thing, right? It's like I learned about behaviorism in psychology, right? The idea of like conditioning and rewards and things like that. And so then but like I'm thinking about like B.F. Skinner and like the pigeon pecks on the pellet and stuff like that. And so then to me to find out, it's like, wait, they did those experiments on pigeons, and now they're making kids do what? And so it was hard for me to wrap my head around. But the way you're describing it, I think it's always important I think the best clinicians are the ones who are very humane about it, and they think in terms of like, okay, the child is showing this behavior, but like, or the patient is like, what's motivating that? Like, what's going inside them? And then the goal is like, how do we kind of reshape their behavior so that they can participate more in society, in a classroom? Yes. And that again, it's about giving them a life full of choices and opportunities. And and so like I try to like not interfere with my son's stimming, but if it's after my bedtime, I'm going to tell him to stop stimming. It's like, so for the most part, I'm not embarrassed if we're out in public and he starts stimming, but if it's after my bedtime,
yes, now we're talking.
We live together. Okay. You're living in my house and I say, sorry. Yeah.
No, but like I like the point that you made, like because we were talking about in terms of like ABA and psychology, they do go hand in hand, and they do overlap in some areas as well, or at least in the foundation of how it is started. And yeah, like you said, like it's not, those experiments don't carry over to our kids, like it's not really like that, but it's more about the thought process in terms of like how behavior works, and we continue doing things the more that we get reinforced by that behavior. So it's like, okay, but is that behavior dangerous for the kid and the family and others? Like, can we try to give it like a different alternative so they can have fun and they can explore the environment in a safe manner, and also to teach? Again, their brain is so unique that they do need a different approach, and that's why we go to therapy, so we can find a unique way that kids learn.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's it's a hard thing to explain, and you did a great job, because I feel like I've tried to explain it to people and they're like, wait, what? So, but it's part of the toolkit.
It is true. Yeah, I actually had this conversation today with a mom too as well. Like literally today in a new family I'm working with, she was talking about ABA, and I was like, no, this is I worked in ABA as a behavioral technician years before, and I see the benefits. I even see moms that have their kids diagnosed with autism, and they're jumping into the ABA realm as well, because they get to see it in therapy and they want to do more about it, and they're jumping into the ABA field as well. And again, like, we don't tell parents like, oh, you should go to ABA, but hey, like, this will be beneficial in these areas, and it's up to the parents to decide if it's something that they want to pursue or not.
Right. Okay, and then let's see. I think there's one more. Oh yeah, psychology services, right? So what kinds of things can psychological therapy help with? Yeah.
So psychology, the clinics that we're working with, they help big time, both in the initial interaction when it comes to testing and diagnosis, but also treatment. And psychology is not just in terms of kind of like ABA. Most of the times they only work with kids with autism. Psychology, they can see multiple diagnoses. We're talking about anxiety, depression, bipolar, ODD, ADHD as well.
Depression.
Yes, and
PTSD.
Yeah, and the other benefit about psychology is that they do help parents have a general idea of, like, medication wise. They don't prescribe, but they will guide parents whether or not they should talk to their PCP or psychiatrist about any other medication. And And again, it's not just like the straight go to medication. It's like, hey, let's start with changing diets. Let's maybe try therapy for a while, and that's where they will report back to like occupational therapy or any other type of therapy that's needed. And then if we might need another type of intervention, that's when they start talking about medication, and that's one of the benefits of psychology. Again, just giving a lot of more options and more holistic approach for the family. And as any other discipline, they don't work just directly with the patient, but also the family as a whole. And they do a lot of parent training like any other disciplines that we discussed.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's, the blog post is, I think, is going to be such a good resource for families because it lays out, what some of the differences are, and like, it's very clear how it's written, and there's sort of these everyday experiences that families have, and then they're not sure who to turn to, right? And
Yes.
of course they should talk to their family physician, and yes, talk to your support network and stuff, but but if you have this insurance and you need an appointment at 4 p.m. and
Yes.
you're in this part of town, like, and you're trying to thread the needle, like Pediatric Constellations can make the difference between a family getting services or just being stuck, waiting, or feeling like they can't afford it, or they can't make it fit their schedule. And then, the child is not going to be able to reach their full potential because they're not getting the help that they need, early enough to make the most difference.
Yeah. And everyone's so responsive in Pediatric Constellation. Like, even just if you have one question, like, just contact them. And again, we know this because we work with them, and everyone has been very responsive. So just for the mom or dad that might have one question, like, I don't know, like, just message them. Like, just hopefully you don't need anything, your kid doesn't need any other extra support, but at least just try and contact them so you can get a clear answer versus, I don't know, just be guessing and not have any other options. They are very responsive.
Yeah. Well, and y'all have already been sharing, anecdotes and stories of, like, families you've talked to, but, like, can you think of any other stories that kind of illustrate, like, like how this kind of solution can make a difference?
I'm very excited because this has happened multiple times. Not enough. I want more, but when I have heard of parents that have matched with multiple providers. And that's such a cool thing because I've never heard of that before, in terms of like a mom having 2 or 3 different disciplines, 2 or 3 therapists under the same discipline, so she can pick what's the best fit for the kid. And I think that's really cool. Again, I might be biased because I'm on this side, but when I get to hear that from parents, it makes me very excited because I like options, and I feel like a lot of parents like to have options as well. So I think that would be another story that I don't think we got to share until right now. But hopefully we can make it that happen more frequently. So far, the thing happened 3 times with 3 different families, but now I wish we can have it more frequently.
Well, families having more options, like, you're speaking my language, like, that's what that's what Escape Hormones is all about. Because sometimes there's more to it than, like, you want people, like, I mean, I feel like especially like this, my son had 2 different speech pathologists at different times. One of them moved to the Virgin Islands, and I'm like, I really can't argue with that. That's good for you. But like both of the speech language therapists that he worked with for a significant period of time, like, both really helped with like our family dynamics and our communication, and like I would say, hey, we had this issue at school, like, how do we look at this through a speech lens, and how do I coach him? And they would always give me homework, and then we would I would go out with him in the world, especially the year that I homeschooled him for first grade. And a lot of what we did was like, okay, we're going to go to a slightly uncomfortable situation, and you're going to have to navigate this. And it really helped him grow. And I was able to be there and coach him, and then go back the next week and then say, okay, reporting back, this is what happens. Like, what do I try? And so, but that takes having a therapist who's a good fit and is willing to, like, that was what I needed help with. A different family might need something completely different. Like, they might not have capacity to do the homework the way I did it, and so then they need more, more stuff happening, like, in the therapy sessions, right? So different families are going to have different relationships, and
and like you said too, it is a relationship. Like, we want to make those connections happen where a parent feels confident or enough, or just comfortable to ask all the questions that maybe you did. Like, you ask all these questions, and if you need extra homework to continue generalizing the skills that your child is learning in the therapy, then you can ask those, so that hopefully we can continue making those connections easy and accessible for families, because it is maybe something that a family is seeking as well.
Or having that confidence that therapists have that bond with the family to let parents know, like, hey, I don't know, we had the discussion, but I think this might be going on in school. This is something that we need to investigate in school. And again, have that trust, because without trust, then I might not say anything that the kids might need. Like maybe they do need more adjustments in school, but again, it all comes down to trust and having that relationship. And no parent, and like you mentioned, like sometimes it's not a good match, unfortunately, and no parent should feel stuck because they don't have any other options. They should know what other options are out there so they can find the good match for their own kid. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who gets to treat the kid. It's just whether or not that kid is happy and is making the progress that the family needs.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, we've answered all the questions on my checklist, except I want to make sure that we cover like how folks can get in touch with you guys. So I have my little banners ready, but I'm wondering if you can describe like what like the best way is through the website, right? And there's a form.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's a form, there's a button, you just click it. It shouldn't take more than 2 minutes. Or just through social media, you can just message us if you're having a hard time with a form or whatnot. But yes, or email, you can email us into info@pediatricconstellations.com. But we are very responsive. We're always checking our emails or messages, and we don't go any message go unanswered.
Yeah. Well, I'm so impressed with what you guys are building, because like I'm a big believer in like, we can use technology and we can share information. It will help families get to where they need to go, right? And like I don't have the answer of like, oh, this is the right school for you, but I have the tools to help you get there. And if each family gets informed, then it's for the benefit of the kids.
And I'm pretty sure, you're familiar with that school. If you talk to other families that go to that school, and we do the same thing, we get to meet with all the business owners and all the clinics, and we get to get a feel to make sure that we're all heading in the same direction. We have the same goal, which is helping out the community and the families. And we don't have anyone in Pediatric Constellations that we don't know or we haven't interacted with. That way, again, because I mean, recommending someone does carry a lot of responsibilities as well. So we want to make sure that we are sending the families to the right clinics or therapists.
Yeah, and if there's any providers, watching this who haven't been in touch with you guys, like they could reach out as well, and you can get to know them and see if they're a good fit.
We would love to talk to you. We would like to collaborate. Again, there's a lot of work to be done, and we're gonna do it by ourselves. And we would love to work as a team, because we think we can do a lot more working as a team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the more kids that have a strong village around them, the more kids will be able to reach their full potential, and that's really important.
Exactly, and it will inspire other families to see like it's possible. It's hard, but it's possible. And again, it's ups and downs. But at the end of the day, everyone should be making progress towards their goals.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I really appreciate what you guys do. I'm so glad you reached out to me, and I'm grateful for the blog post on shhormones.com and the chance to have a conversation about it too.
Thank you for the opportunity to host this here.
And this will definitely not be the last time we talk to you, Inga. I really appreciate the interview.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll keep in touch. Have a great evening.
You too. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.